more recent example of religion in the curriculum, we're looking at that idea of multiculturalism, was a fairly high-profile case called Citizens for a Responsible Curriculum versus Montgomery County Public Schools in 2005. And so the citizens group had challenged this health curriculum, and they included discussion of sexual orientation. And so normally when groups come in and try to oppose homosexuality, they can't cite the Establishment Clause as the basis for a complaint. But this particular curriculum was showing some bias in terms of one idea or one teaching. And so the district court had concluded that the curriculum had both the purpose and effect of advancing certain faiths while ignoring the beliefs of others. And so then the county was able to rewrite all of these different materials and exclude any reference to the views of particular faiths. And so they made it more neutral in nature, and so it did not include that bias that would violate the Establishment Clause. For religious freedoms, students are able to go ahead and distribute religious literature to their peers, but the school can determine when and where they do this. Just like if non-religious material was being distributed, they can put rules and regulations around it, just as long as it's the same as non-religious material, what they would do with non-religious material. And schools can also teach about religion, but it has to be from the perspective of not implying that there's one religion that's better than the other, or to make sure that students see the religious values or make them further their religious experience. And schools cannot single out religious attire, and if exceptions are made for religious clothing, then the same exceptions must be made for non-religious clothing. And students must be allowed to be excused from class on a religious basis, just as they're excused from class on a non-religious basis. And so school officials have a practice of excusing students from class on the basis of parents requesting that their child have an accommodation of non-religious needs. And so religiously motivated excusals are not supposed to be less favorable. When we take a look at rights in and out of the classroom, Tinker versus Des Moines School District 1969 was stating that schools may not suppress expression unless it significantly disrupts school discipline or invades the rights of others. And so this was where it upheld the right of students to wear armbands protesting the Vietnam War. And the court ruled that school authorities could not suppress the expression unless it significantly disrupted school discipline or invaded the rights of others. And then there were these 4 principles that were developed for the religious expression in public school with some guidelines. And so these 4 principles were that students acting on their own have the same right to engage in religious activity and discussion as they do to engage in comparable secular activities. Students can offer a prayer or blessing before meals in school or assemble on school grounds for religious purposes to the same extent as other students who wish to express their personal views or assemble with others. Thirdly, students may not engage in religious harassment of others or compel other students to participate in religious expression, and schools can control aggressive and unwanted ideas or unwanted practices. Schools may neither favor nor disfavor students or groups on the basis of their religious identities. And Harper versus Poway Unified School District 2006 stated that the First Amendment does not protect harassment. So this was a case that was decided by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it looks at the difficulties that school officials can face when they're looking at these ideas of right to religious expression on school property. And so in this case, they rejected Harper's claim that the school officials violated his First Amendment rights. He was wanting to wear a shirt to school that said, "Be ashamed, our school has embraced what God has condemned," and then it had a Bible verse on the back. And so the school officials had him remove the shirt and change to something else. And so then he claimed that that was violating his First Amendment rights. And so They cited Tinker and argued that the students' constitutional rights may be limited to prevent harming the rights of other students, and concluded that the t-shirt could be seen as violating the school policies against harassment based on sexual orientation. And then looking further into this, the school district also had really weak sexual harassment policy, and so it was too vague to support a restriction on all anti-gay speech. And so this was one of those more difficult ones where it was hard to determine like what was truly going to be a violation of the students' First Amendment rights and what was not. And then religious expression and the rights of other students is to be educated. The rights of other students to be educated in a non-hostile environment is a topic that's likely to come up again and again. So rights in and out of the classroom continued. So a lot of times parents believe that secular education does not allow them to bring up their child in a religious environment. So some different examples of this have been Amish families wishing to withdraw their children from education at 14. Then you kind of also get into all of these religious opt-outs being too narrow and too vague. But also parents sometimes believe that the curriculum that's being taught is not aligning with their religious views. And so these curriculum opt-outs often pose issues within schools. And public school employees are free to engage in religious-based activities when they're off-duty, but not while they are a government employee, and they can't be sponsoring these religious activities. And then there's kind of a difficult line to draw between these official duties and their own time when teachers are on duty and when they're off duty, and where they can serve and when. Religious activities and equal access. Religious groups are to have equal access to meeting space and any other recognition that non-religious groups receive. So it's just all about this equity piece. So if you're giving one group this meeting space, then you have to also give these religious groups a meeting space as well. And Congress passed the Equal Access Act of 1984, which prevented public secondary schools from discriminating on the basis of religion or political viewpoint. And it's difficult to know when the Equal Access Act will usurp the free speech clause, because you have to provide the same access to things, meeting spaces, any other sort of recognition, but then it also can't trump this free speech clause. CLO correlation. This assignment demonstrates correlation to CLO 6.3 by requiring me to read about religion in schools and create a presentation that allows me to communicate with the Board of Education on current laws and policies. I evaluated the role-play situation with regard to legal, ethical, and equity issues by ensuring that I not only kept the facts from research in the presentation, I analyzed how the law and policy were applied consistently, fairly, equitably, and ethically within my presentation by ensuring that I read through each of the readings and looked at it case by case from a neutral viewpoint. Since this was not to sway anyone, I ensured that I communicated these policies, laws, regulations, and procedures in an unbiased way to stakeholders by providing the facts. I would monitor and ensure adherence to these laws, rights, policies, and regulations in the future by ensuring that I follow the current trends and am knowledgeable about all these laws, and that my own district has clear policies in place. Relevant. This assignment is relevant to my current learning because even though religion in schools is an extremely hot topic and is something that's consistently in the media, I've not researched it much. I grew up in a small religious conservative town in Kansas, so it's not uncommon for there to be student-led religious activities, but they're never school-sponsored, and I don't have any experiences with a teacher teaching religion within the classroom. This improved my understanding of the content because it allowed me to see it from a legal perspective and see how the Supreme Court rules when it comes to these cases. For reflection, this assignment will influence the decisions I'll make as a future school leader because it allowed me to take a legal perspective on these specific situations. I'll ensure that the laws and policies are followed within my own district, and additionally, I will also work to ensure that my board has policies in place that are clear and equitable when it comes to religious freedom. And these are the references that I used throughout this presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.